Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is November 24th. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there across Pacific Northwest or wherever you may be watching from. Now, there's a lot to talk about today, folks. Let's just go ahead and jump right into things. Infrared satellite imagery showing this atmospheric river impacting BC will slide down south across Washington, Oregon through tomorrow. If we take a look out west of Alaska, you can see the initial stages of this cold air that's going to make its presence known here across Pacific Northwest. And then in the wake of that, there's a potential for even colder air to move down across British Columbia on through early and mid next week here. We'll be taking a look at that in some detail. And that's what everybody wants to know about. How close is Arctic air going to get? Is it going to snow in the lowlands? All good questions that we'll try to answer here, and we'll take a look at that here in a moment. GOES 17 satellite imagery here. Low clouds across the Puget Sound. Some dense fog was out there this morning. Dense fog advisories were out there. Willamette Valley is pretty socked in this morning as well as some portions of eastern Washington. Also, hopefully those burn off for a lot of the areas. You can see some of the valleys here through BC, North Washington, and on through northwest Montana still remain socked in. But this should start to slide down south as we go through the day today. Maybe some lenticular cloud action across the higher terrain, so get your cameras out for that potential. Now, taking a look at Spokane here, holiday travel impact forecast Friday, Saturday, Sunday could be pretty impactful days. Don't sleep on Friday here. Going to get some probably measurable snowfall across Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass, and a lot of people get caught off guard because we might be waiting for this really cold air mass to come in Sunday, but Friday is probably going to bring some measurable snowfall as well. And this is going to impact all the way down through southern Oregon, on through Idaho, Montana, British Columbia, Washington, pretty much everywhere. So heads up for this if you're coming home from your Thanksgiving Day travels. Now, taking a look at that, snow impacts early next week. Snow levels lowering to around 2,000 feet here. Siskiyou Summit on I-5 could be getting some measurable snowfall here by Monday morning, Monday afternoon. Klamath Falls, maybe an inch or two there, of course, favoring the higher terrain, as always, though. So heads up for that. Now, taking a look, atmospheric river, here it goes. So you can see it impacting Vancouver Island as we go through this evening. British Columbia starts to sag south tomorrow morning. Pretty rainy day for Seattle coming up tomorrow. Cascades, Mount Rainier northward through Washington to BC. Some pretty good precipitation amounts, and you can see it weakened as it slides down south through Oregon. Really cuts off there as you get through southern Oregon, again with the rain shadow in eastern Washington as we mentioned yesterday. So now taking a look at the impacts here, if you take a look at the NAM high resolution model, you can see some snowfall here for Snoqualmie Pass and Stevens Pass, and this will eventually work down through some of the Oregon Cascades as well as some of the higher terrain for northeast Oregon, Idaho, Montana. So heads up if you're out there traveling, you're driving home, be prepared during those going through those mountain passes here during Friday night on into Saturday morning. Now we're going to take a look at here, a wider view, North America, Alaska, BC, Washington, Oregon. This is 10,000 foot temperature, and you can see the frontal system here going to sag south across the area. Then the really cold air starts to move down across the Gulf of Alaska, and you can see it plow into the Pacific Northwest. During the day, Sunday overtakes Oregon by Sunday night, Monday morning, and then a much more chilly polar lobe starts to move down across the Yukon here. And look at this nasty thing moving down through British Columbia towards Washington. Really powerful polar lobe potential here coming up on in through mid next week coming up here, folks. So we'll take a look at that in more detail coming up. I want to take a wider look at things here and show you where this Arctic air is coming from. You can see it coming off of Asia here, and that's the first wave of it. So that moves down across the Gulf of Alaska into the Pacific Northwest. And then you see the colder one moving down across the Yukon here, British Columbia into Washington there. And if you trace back, this is all the way back across the Arctic Ocean here and just off the north shore there of Russia and Siberia. So you can see where that air came from. Very cold and potentially pretty nasty polar lobe coming down towards Pacific Northwest here. Now, taking a look at the GFS, let's see what it has to say. You can see that frontal system sag south across the region. Then you see that colder air, pretty similar to the European here, moving across the Pacific Northwest. And then the polar low back here across the Yukon, northern BC. Pretty good model agreement there. This moves all the way out across Pacific Northwest here. Then the models start to diverge here as we go through the extended, but that's to be expected for now. We'll worry about that later. Now, taking a look here, Spokane International Airport, you can see that cold air arrives. We get into Monday morning across the region here. Then the second polar low. Look at some of these temperatures. These are below 0 Fahrenheit. This is not Celsius here, folks. And you can see the control run. Even the mean is down towards 0 here as we go through mid and later next week for Spokane. So heads up, you can clearly see the change. Arctic air is likely on its way, especially east of the Cascades. Spokane International, look at some of these temperatures down in the single digits here. Highs maybe not even getting to 20 20 degrees for a couple of these days. We'll see how that goes, and we'll watch this day by day as always. Taking a look at Kamloops, look at the interior of BC. This is just ridiculous. First wave you can clearly see here. Then the next wave, the big polar lobe, moves down over the interior of British Columbia here. And this is negative 30 Celsius. So you're talking about temperatures below negative 20 Fahrenheit potentially for the interior of BC there. Just had to show you guys the extent of this cold air up there. The interior of BC is, the confidence is extremely high that this cold air mass is going to set up shop there. And you can see here, it gives you a good diagram here as we go on in through Monday and on in through next week of what's coming for the interior of British Columbia here. Now looking at Portland, you can see some pretty chilly temperatures moving down. Some highs maybe not even getting up towards 40. We'll continue to watch this as it goes. And this is going to depend on what kind of systems traverse across the west coast of the Pacific Northwest here. So we'll continue to watch this, but you can clearly see the pattern change to these colder temperatures coming as we go on in through next week. This is Seattle-Tacoma. You can see a lot of these ensemble members have some pretty chilly air moving down across the region. Look at the control run, even down to 20 degrees here as we go through next week, even towards next weekend here. And you can see the first clip of this cold air moving across the region here as well. Could bring some snowfall as we go through a Monday morning across some of the western Washington, southwest BC area. We'll look at that in some detail also. So here we're looking at 850 millibar temperature anomaly, 5,000 feet. We're comparing the European on the right from yesterday afternoon's, the more recent last night's European here on the left, the 06Z run. If we put this into motion here, you see Friday's system sag across the area here. Colder air starts to arrive out of the northwest here. And look at this Arctic air start to set up over British Columbia here, even more than the previous European run. So a definite uptick there for Arctic air into the region. And then as we go through the extended a little bit more here, here's the end of the 06Z run. You can clearly see the Arctic air with a more southern extent here across British Columbia here on last night's European run here. So good if you like Arctic air into the Pacific Northwest. Let's check out what the GFS has to say. This is the ensemble mean, an average of all 30 runs here. So we're going to go ahead and speed ahead here. And here comes Monday morning system here as it moves through, drops that cold front across the area. Arctic high starts to build across British Columbia. And this is when we could be looking at our first chance for some lowland snow, especially southwest BC, western Washington. Some convergent zone activity could be going on here. We'll watch that closely in the upcoming days. Now, again, the Arctic air gets reinforced by another polar lobe coming across the region here. Very strong Arctic high setting up over British Columbia with resultant troughing here over the Pacific Northwest. Could be bringing some snowfall across the area here as well. We'll take a look at some greater detail here in a moment. This is the GFS on the right versus GFS on the left. The left is hot off the presses, the 12Z run versus last night's 06Z run. We're looking at the same map we just looked at. So here goes the system as it moves down Sunday on in through Monday morning here. Cold front drops down across the region. Arctic high a little bit stronger here on the most recent GFS run. A resultant troughing still could be bringing some convergent zone activity across southwest BC, western Washington. So a little lowland snowfall possible at that one. And then here comes the stronger one. Look at this Arctic high that sags south in the 12Z European run. This would be pretty significant here. That's pumping a lot of cold air down into this trough here as it comes across Washington state. So we have to watch that closely. And you can see the trend here, 12Z GFS, much stronger with the Arctic high into British Columbia versus the 06Z. So a definite uptrend there in the cold air moving into the region here, or at least down into Washington and Oregon. Now, let's take a look at the Canadian model run and see what it says. We're looking at the same map here. Here we go on into Sunday afternoon and Monday morning. You can see that cold front drape across the area. Arctic high starts to move down to the region, potential for some lowland snow. Again, mainly Washington up through southwest BC with this first system. And then another system comes across. And look at this nasty little bugger here, this low pressure system setting up right over western Washington here on the most recent Canadian with Arctic high sagging south across British Columbia. Could be bringing a significant snowfall for some portions of the Pacific Northwest here as we go on in through Wednesday here. Now we go out a little further and yet another system drops down south across the region here with the strong Arctic high still over the Yukon, BC, sagging south across Washington would be another significant snowstorm across the region here, folks. Now let's take a look at 2-meter temperature anomaly. This is the Canadian, the one we just looked at here. Friday's system. Cold air arrives and you're going to feel it, especially the higher terrain and the passes initially. And then you can see the second polar lobe move down across the region. Look at some of BC dropping 30 degrees below average here. This is Fahrenheit anomaly here across central BC. Very cold air into eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, really engulfing the entire region. And then the Canadian says we're not done yet. It brings just another vicious shot of cold air through British Columbia here. Look at some of these temperatures at 40 below average here. This is not temperature aloft. This isn't at 18,000 feet. This is at the surface here, folks. So a very interesting pattern coming up here. So we're just going to have to take this day at a time here. As you can see, we have multiple rounds of cold air moving down towards the region. This is the GFS 2-meter temperature anomaly right at the surface. Here comes that cold air as we go through Monday morning. BC starts to really cool down as you get towards Tuesday morning. And then the big lobe starts to move down across the region here as we go through mid next week. And look at the GFS, it just gets kind of ridiculous here. I mean, 50 degrees below average here across central BC. That's just out of control. And the resolution is going to be poor at this range here on the GFS. So I don't know how much of this is going to be working out into the Puget Sound here, but it's definitely going to be much below average as we go here through the extended forecast. I mean, just kind of ridiculous showing here by the GFS. So 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, like I said yesterday, we're trending colder. 8 to 14 day also trending colder too. This one goes through early December 1st through 7th here. Taking a look here now, we're going to look at a couple case studies here before we finish up. This is the Canadian. This is Monday morning. You can see the resultant troughing here in the Arctic ice setting up over British Columbia. And you might say, this does not look like a very strong low pressure system here, but sometimes that's all it takes. You take the correct trajectory off the coast of BC back into Western Washington, Southwest BC. You can get significant snowfall, and it doesn't take a big 990 millibar low to do it. Now, taking a look here at 1985 December, significant snowstorm across Pacific Northwest, and you look at this low pressure system and you say, wow, that's not a very strong storm out there. But you look at this gradient that sets up across the southern BC area into northern Washington here, and that brought some cold air down to the region, and it doesn't take much. Again, the correct trajectory off the coastline of BC back into Western Washington can cause substantial snowfalls. And this is 1990, December 18th. A lot of you guys might remember this one. Brought over a foot to areas of Seattle and even higher amounts north and east of Seattle, all the way down through the Puget Sound. And you can see just kind of a gentle resultant troughing, at least compared to some of the Pacific systems we get in here. So it does not take a 980 millibar low or a 990 millibar low to bring substantial snowfalls here to the Pacific Northwest. Just wanted to show you guys that one. You guys may remember this if you've been in the Pacific Northwest for a while now. So anyway, yeah, I may do a live stream after this. I got a few things to do today, and then I'll come back to it and we'll check out the 12Z European. That's what we'll look at. If I can do this live stream, I'll try to pull that off here. But yeah, cold air confidence is increasing across the Pacific Northwest, and we are definitely going to go over this again tomorrow. We'll keep watching this day by day. We'll check out these individual systems as they move across these Arctic highs, and this resultant troughing moves across the region here, and this very cold air is going to set up shop over British Columbia. So we'll check out just what kind of an Arctic blast is going to make its way west of the mountains into southwest BC, Washington, and Oregon, and what kind of cold air gets down into eastern Washington and Oregon. Lots to look at here the next few days. So things are going to get crazy here over the next several days here across Pacific Northwest. So anyway, you guys click like, subscribe, leave some comments below. I'll try to do a live stream today, and I'll talk to you guys either then or tomorrow.